I'm here to talk about your opportunities to integrate with bus via the refresh of the BSIP 2024. So I have put some slides together, which we're going to share with you after the event as well. So don't feel like you have to take masses of notes. So a little bit about me, why I'm here, what I've done, where I've come from. So my name is Lydia Horbury. Currently, I'm the Director for England at Bus Users UK. A long time ago, I started in the travel industry as a student. I used to work in Ibiza for Club 1830. I then moved on to British Airways and was involved in the project that stopped the planes dropping out of the sky due to a coding issue in the year 2000. I then went into teaching and was very much about business and enterprise all the way up to degree level before moving back into kind of project management and what I'm doing now. So hopefully you'll have heard of Bus Users UK. We are technically a charity. We're all about inclusive transport and accessibility. We're also officially the ADR, so where you go to if you have a complaint about a bus for the bus transport industry. We also do lots of events, lots of getting feedback, lots of lobbying, lots of dealing with government. And our CEO, Claire Walters, is the ambassador for disability access in buses. Okay, so what we're going to do today. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview of BSIPs and EPs, and then we're going to talk specifically about how that refresh gives you an opportunity to potentially integrate and to get that bus and rail network working better together. I've got a whole raft of practical suggestions as well today. I'm really keen that you go away from this session thinking, right, okay, I've got a bit of an action plan now. I know some practical steps that I can do to try and to make this happen. And at the end, if we've got any time left, I'm hoping that we can have a bit of a roundtable discussion and, of course, an opportunity for any questions. As you all popped into the waiting room, I did see as well that there were some different titles across England, Scotland and Wales. So obviously one of the challenges that we have is that it is slightly different in Scotland and Wales. So I'm happy to talk to you guys at the end as well, and also to put you in touch with, we have a director for Scotland and a director for Wales, if you've got anything specific that they're able to help you with. Okay. Let's go, buses. So I'm sure everybody that was working in public transport felt this, but at the end of the pandemic, there'd been this huge shift into cars. We also, as an industry, and particularly buses, we've got decades of chronic underfunding, car-centric policies, and also just, you know, trying to play off local transport authorities against each other, which had left the bus industry in quite a sorry state. So to try and avoid this completely crippling buses, we came up with the National Bus Strategy, or rather Boris Johnson did. Previously, buses have been run in a very commercial capacity and it was all about profits. There was it was an identification of the fact that, okay, we need to make sure that this now flows better into local transport authorities. And this led to the creation of the National Bus Strategy, which, and it's a Boris Johnson term, he called it the Bus Back Better, which I am aware sounds a little bit like something that you might put through Google Translate, not quite English. But essentially, it was about improving local bus services, and it was about making the operators work together with local authorities. That's what it was trying to force. They did that through two things, having what we call the bus service improvement plans, and for there to be partnerships. So enhanced partnerships or franchises. It was all about as well getting buses and the strategies that local authorities use in terms of prioritisation to come further up the agenda. So looking at things like demand response transport, looking at bus priorities and different ways you can do that through allocation of the road and lanes and traffic signalling and that kind of thing. Just better information for passengers, which was, of course, music to our ears at Bus Users, and looking as well at multimodal tickets as well, which and just generally better frequency of buses and routes. So the enhanced partnership is an agreement between an authority and an operator, and they aim together to identify things that they want to improve, and they come up with a list of objectives. There is another option that areas could go down, and that is a bus franchise. So that's where everything is determined by the franchising authority. At the moment, franchises are only being run by areas that have combined authorities, so mayoral combined authorities. Greater Manchester have put it in, Liverpool are taking a step closer to it, so are West Yorkshire currently, and I believe that South Yorkshire will be next. So it's something that is popular. And in terms of the outputs, I think that the outputs could be very, very similar. It was more the way in which it's organised behind the scenes that the difference is. But they still have BSIPs, which is what's important, because this is where you can take a little bit of advantage. So a BSIP is the partnership plan between the local transport authority and a bus operator. And generally a BSIP, there was a consultation when they were first put into place, probably in 2021, and they'll have targets and they'll say how they're going to achieve those targets. So when they rolled out the first BSIP, it was also a document that was used for funding. So the Department for Transport had a look at it and then made a decision as to how much money, or if they were going to give any money at all, to that local transport authority. And in the first phase, when it was rolled out, there was a lot of excitement. These BSIP documents were really well put together, a lot of work, a lot of collaboration, but actually only 41% of the local transport authorities received any funding at all. As you can imagine, that was quite a disappointment. So they went on to the second phase of funding, where they focused more on the areas that hadn't got any funding in that first time, and they've split that between 23-24 and then 24-25, so they're dripping that money out, but to those operators. And then there is a third phase, which I'm sure that you will be aware of, and this is as a result of the HS2 and the rail continuing being cancelled, so part of their Network North project. Although I do note that some money has already been taken from that fund to pay for potholes in the south of England. So I'm sure that you know this as well, but just to bring into play as well, that the local transport authorities, so it's the local transport authorities that actually receive that BSIP funding, and you will be aware that they are all required to produce a local transport plan. So that sets out their plans and objectives for developing all aspects of a local transport system. So one of the things that is part of this plan is public transport integration. My reason for mentioning this specifically as well is that this is another opportunity that you can harness. It's supposed to be in the LTP. So BSIP 2024 refresh. At the end of January, the DFT asked for refreshed BSIPs to be submitted by the 12th of June this year. By and large, I'd say that it's caused mass panic amongst some areas, particularly where it's a combined authority, because all of those areas are about to go through elections. And because there's going to be a mayor election, that means it's like a bit of a decision-making just dearth. So from the 26th of March, they'll not be able to make any decisions about transport up until, I think it's like the end of May when they're finished. So it leaves them a very narrow window to be able to refresh their BSIP. So they might actually appreciate a little bit of help from people like yourselves. So the BSIP 24 refresh is building on the previous plan that they had. But in there, they're doing three key things. They're detailing the progress that they've made to date on the existing plan. Some of them will have made more progress than others. As I pointed out, in that first round, it was only 41% of transport authorities that actually got any money. So there were a lot of authorities that put these quite ambitious plans in, but they didn't get any money at that time to be able to make much of an impact. The next point is that they've got to say exactly for the financial year 24-25 what their plan is, how they're going to spend that money, and the detailed plan, which should dovetail into the local transport plan. And then the third section was getting ready for 2025 and beyond. So looking at the plan's ambitions, what the pipelines are, what the priorities are, and where they would like to be roughly year 28-29. So, interestingly, it's a requirement that all BSIPs are produced in consultation. And that obviously includes bus operators, but it does mean that other stakeholder groups, including community-based groups like yourselves, have an opportunity to get involved in that. And now is the time to be talking to your local transport authority as they work on the refresh. If you are very serious about trying to get integration, by having it incorporated into that plan, it makes it set in stone. The BSIP is a public document and a document of objectives that they are measured against. So you know that if you can get it in there, then you can really influence that change. There are a couple of areas in the BSIP in which a partnership could try and get involved. So I'm going to reference, and remember, I'm sending you these slides so you'll be able to kind of find this yourself. There's a link to it on the previous slide, but in here we've got the bus vision. So in the bus vision, it says very, very specifically in the section that talks about bus patronage and modal share, that buses are better integrated with other modes and each other, including more bus rail interchange and integration and interbus transfers. So I work with lots of different enhanced partnerships across the country. I dial in via Zoom, and every single one that I know, when they're doing the BSIPs, they are working using that template. So if you know which section it is, it makes it a lot easier for you to make your argument. So you're going in and you're talking about how a change maybe and better integration with your particular station will help support that. The second section that also references rail very specifically is, again, and I mentioned this in the beginning, but it's about this multi-operator or multimodal ticketing. So a lot of people have ambitions in the longer run for tickets to be across all transport modes, including light rail and rail. So BSIPs it's a requirement that BSIPs support that vision. So by working again with the BSIPs and with the people rolling that out, that's another opportunity, looking at how you can achieve that. And also within that section as well, it keeps talking about multimodal hubs and also bus stations and rail stations. So that's the bit of the BSIP that you need to look at. And for your local authority, or whether you're in a combined authority, you should be able to very easily find that on the internet by just Googling BSIP and then the name of where you are. And that should be a publicly available document. So how can we use the BSIP to try and force this integration a little bit? So first of all, it's reminding the local authority that a BSIP is meant to achieve improvements for all residents and communities, and to make it easier for travel without the use of a car. So what that means is, whilst it might be the bus service improvement plan, funding can be used for loads of things. It's not just actually something that is specifically a bus service. So what I mean by that is you could perhaps harness that to use make changes to infrastructure and integration as well. So those funds could be used for that. If you are pushing for that, please be aware that any local transport authority has to clear use of the funds with the Department for Transport. So try and do it sooner rather than later, because these processes all take a while. The other thing is that BSIP boards produce and publish a passenger charter. Again, that's something that they just have to do. So I would ask for that and have a look at it and see who the passenger representatives are on there, and see if you can get in touch with them one way or another. Quite often, a lot of their, in the passenger charter, their objectives, again, will be about making things easier for passengers. So you can offer to road test certain journeys for them, or, you know, suggest how creating that integration will make things better for the general public. Some EPs are written better than others, the passenger charters. So some of them, they're supposed to have very measurable objectives. Okay, so it's supposed to be laid out really clearly as to what it is that it's trying to achieve. But in some cases, they can be a little bit woolly. And they'll say things like, we will do our best to, or where reasonable, we. It's also perfectly acceptable for you to go in there and to suggest some tightening up and some specifics so that they can be strengthened, so they can be measured. And that might actually be that you're making a recommendation about some integration. So rather than we'll do our best to improve integration between bus and rail, you know, you could get them to change that to saying we will improve the integration between bus and rail by ensuring that, and then some very specific actions in there. If you can get it into that paperwork, you are halfway there. So I wanted us to think about, like I say, quite a practical action plan of things that you can do. And this is where I will appreciate some input from you. Feel free if you want to raise your hands and to join in anything that I say, because you're the experts in rail. So I thought that we would start with objection handling. So sales speak for what are the primary problems? Because if we can think of solutions to overcome some of these things that actually stop the integration in the first place, then perhaps that's one really easy way of taking a solution to the people that make the decisions and saying, right, this is how we're going to do it. So first things first, and you can tell I spoke to a lot of bus people, because the first thing that came up on the list was bus stops. So one of the biggest barriers that we have is several train stations are inaccessible for buses. Now, that's not to say that you can't use creative land of either like public realm, whether you have some kind of car park using temporary bus stops. There's various things that you can do to ensure that there's some kind of safe drop off. The other thing I think as well is that often people say there's not space outside a railway station. Well, integration is important, but that doesn't mean that, you know, it doesn't need to be at least nearby. It doesn't have to be immediately outside. Timetables, they're always a problem as well. So talking to my colleague in Scotland, he was explaining that ScotRail sets their rail timetable 5 years in advance and they won't deviate. So then, of course, the emphasis then is on the bus operators to be a little bit more flexible, to try and bend to fit with the train times. But there is quite a complicated bus registration process, and the traffic commissioners won't allow a bus to wait for a delayed train in that capacity. So it can be problematic, particularly if people are dependent upon that service. Bus timetables can't just be changed at whim. It's not just a bus operator who gets to decide what routes and what times they do. Once the timetable is in there, then there is an application process, that they need to go through to change any of that. So just be aware of that when you are starting to put together your plans and your suggestions. One thing that we've noticed, and I don't want to sound overtly critical, but there appears to be little cooperation between operators who have both bus and rail, even when they're in the same group, which can be slightly mind-blowing as well. So don't be scared to try and force that cooperation. And in some areas as well, there's an issue a bit with the ticketing. So, for example, those of you who are in Scotland will be aware that at the moment it's free travel on buses for under 22s, but therefore they have to pay when they travel by rail. So in that kind of circumstance, you can understand that actually the preference is to avoid utilising rail as a leg of a journey in order to save money. Currently, across the England, we've got the £2 fare cap as well. So just be aware, until we have really good multimodal ticketing, that those kind of things could be slightly problematic. I was asking my colleagues as well for some areas of good practice, and I would really like you to share some of yours in a moment. And I think that this isn't necessarily something that is a community role, but my colleague Barclay, who's the director for Wales, was explaining that that there's a really good link now between Aberystwyth and Carmarthen South Wales Station using a bus. The T1 bus runs between Aberystwyth and Carmarthen in kind of mid Wales, where you can then catch a journey onto the south, say, for example, Swansea. The way the rail network is set up is that in order to do that, normally you would have to go back out into England and go across to Shrewsbury and then go down. The rail website also shows things like the bus service on departure boards and journey planners. And that's another piece of good practice where we can get that integration, whether it's in a bus station showing the train times or vice versa, in a train showing where the buses are and where they're departing to. Even if it's not electronic, even if we've got funding problems here, let's have a notice board and put that information on there. Has anybody currently on the webinar got some other areas of good practice where they can actually see that integration is happening? Or is that why you're here?
I can see Ben Walsh has got his hand up. Ben?
Great. Please, Ben, do go ahead.
I was just going to say that I remember, I don't know whether it's now going on or not, but in Cambridgeshire anyway, there was the which I'm offering up as an example to show you how things should exist anyway. There used to be a Sunday Rover ticket where you used to be able to purchase it on the bus.
Yeah.
And I used to do it from Cambridge. I used to go up from Cambridge to Sheringham via King's Lynn, and I used to get the bus rail ticket in King's Lynn, then go all the way along the coast hopper to Sheringham, where I could then transfer and use the rail service from Sheringham to Norwich, and then go back to Cambridge on the train, which sadly wasn't included in there. But the fact is that the ticket was valid for both things, you know, like you had one service in East Anglia. I know that's not very good, but nevertheless, you know, it was getting there. Whether it still exists or not is another matter, but it was existing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think there are many multimodal ticketing examples around. The BSIP and the National Bus Strategy is pushing for it. Yes. So the operators and the local transport authorities know that they have to do it. So, you know, we should see this start to come in. And at least when we see the BSIP refresh, I would be, and again, they'll be available on the website. You should be able to go and view that. It should start to identify that as their plans for the next 4 or 5 years, even if they're not doing it immediately. Greater Manchester have done it. So they've brought that in, and it's a bit like London, you know, where there's like a fare cap, so you're tapping, and then it just takes kind of the you know, there's a set maximum amount it can for you to travel all day as well, which I think is really positive. So I think that there's huge opportunity in the future, definitely, and this kind of ticketing is definitely on the cards, Ben.
Thank you.
Tim Barclay.
Hi, Tim.
Hi. Couple of things just to share with you. One, we have in the southeast here the GTR Thameslink services, and I do see that they do use their onboard information screens to advertise, particularly when they're arriving at Gatwick, Three Bridges and Crawley, bus service routes. So they give some information out to passengers that are arriving at certain stations, and they may do that elsewhere on the network, I don't know. And the other thing is that we do have in the southeast, and I'm not sure if it's a national ticketing operation, but we do see adverts for plus bus ticketing, which seems to be a bit patchy and geographically limited, but there is this multimodal ticket called Plus Bus that they do keep mentioning. I've seen it on metro buses advertised as well.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I know another area as well that does those kind of tickets. If there's anybody from the West Midlands, Transport for West Midlands do one as well. And again, it's everywhere. I do think information is king here. You know, I think there's this assumption sometimes when people think about transport, not necessarily us who work in it, but other people, that, you know, transport locally is for the people that live locally. But we also need to remember that there are people who are visitors, who are arriving in cities. So with my job, for example, I zip all over the country and I use public transport. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't. But I'm frequently arriving in towns and I am maybe unfamiliar with them. And you arrive maybe in a rail station and there isn't any signage to the bus, and the other way around. You know, I'll hop on a bus and it doesn't tell me where I'm going to in terms of the rail station. So I think that's one thing that's simple that just would really encourage, I suppose, further integration more than anything. Okay, so
Lydia, I was just got a couple more questions or people wanted to comment, but I was just gonna, quick anecdote for me. I visited a town that I shan't name because I wouldn't want to shame it, but I was looking to catch the bus on from the station, and when I consulted all the timetables, both written and online, the bus stop outside the station was named Burger King, which I thought was very indicative of how it was prioritised in that particular area.
You're absolutely correct. And do you know who's responsible for bus stops? It's the local authority. So, and I mentioned that because often people think it's the bus companies, and I'm just not sure if you all definitely knew that. But when we are lobbying people to change that kind of ridiculous signage, because, you know, these weird local landmarks don't mean anything to people, do they? And the other thing is as well that we see constantly is where there is a landmark no more. So they've knocked down a couple of streets and put a shopping centre in there, but the bus stop still has the name of the old street that now no longer exists as well, just to really confuse people. Yeah, sorry. Next one.
Thank you. Claire Sandys.
Hi, just wanted to say that there's a Derbyshire Wayfarer ticket which gives bus and rail transport virtually across all of Derbyshire, and I've never used it, but people rave about it, and it's been going for many years.
Ooh, that sounds good. Now I wonder if that is something that's physical or it's an app or it's both as well.
You used to have to buy it from the tourist information centres when they were there, but
yeah,
I don't know.
But also from the main train stations.
Lovely. And have we got anyone else that wants to?
Yeah, we do. Bill Young.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, Bill. Just to check your microphone's on. Okay, we'll come back to Bill in a mo. Gary Outram.
Yeah, it's I suppose more questions than anything else, because we've been told we've got a very short timescale to get any comment in, so we won't have the opportunity to pick brains throughout our community. But is this an opportunity to talk about Plus Bus and to say, you know, that most of our towns are connected through that, but we have got some places which aren't. So is this an opportunity to say, yeah, Plus Bus, simple way to get some extended ticketing? And the other thing, so we've been talking about wider tickets. There is something called the Discovery ticket, which gives you unlimited travel in Kent and beyond. So most of the counties in southeast England. Yeah. But the only mention of this on the council website sends you to a completely different authority's website to find the information, which just seems a very poor way to do it, and two, makes me thinking, yeah, how is this publicised? How do people find out about this? Shouldn't it be on an app in this kind of electronic day and age, or even linked and cross-promoted with Kent Rover tickets for the rail.
Yeah, no, you make some really good points there, and they all seem so logical, don't they? You know, you could solve that probably and increase awareness tenfold just by putting it on the app, having it, like you say, the council website, and making sure that the local rail operator and your local bus operator as well advertise that and push it forward. One thing just to be wary of is that putting things digitally on an app is brilliant, but there are huge sectors of our society who do find themselves digitally excluded as well. So I would always recommend that we have that, you know, paper version, whether it's a poster in a station or something like that, because there are huge swathes of people who are, let's say, elderly, and so therefore not interested in apps and smartphones, or through transport poverty as well.
No, definitely both and, not either or.
Perfect. No, I think I just wish that more places would do these kinds of tickets. But like I say, so it does seem like we've got more pockets springing up. So let's hope that this is a continuing trend.
There's also a Waterside Ranger down on the Solent, which is ferry, bus and train ticket all combined, which I'll post a link to some information about that. Bill, should we try you again? And saying I can see that your microphone's on, Mike, and I can see the yellow light flashing as if you're talking, but unfortunately we can't hear you. So I'll go over to Tim, and Bill, perhaps you could put your comment in the chat instead.
Thanks. Sorry to come back again, but a couple of other things that occurred to me in the conversation. My local station is Haywards Heath here in West Sussex, and actually that station has real-time bus information within the booking hall, and it also lists the various bus stop by number for people to find the bus stop, which is just 20 meters away. But what I do notice also is real-time information seems to be very patchy as well in terms of bus stops. Real-time information can be good in one location, and then the next bus stop there's absolutely no information at all. And so I wonder if this is an opportunity to try and improve the practice of actually giving people the confidence that the bus they're waiting for is actually en route to them.
Absolutely. Real-time information crops up again and again and again. So because I represent passenger rights, when I'm on an EP board, I'm already talking about the things that matter to people stood at bus stops. And that is probably the number one, because it gives people faith. You know, you're standing there in the rain. Is the bus coming? It's all very well putting the timetabled information on there, but if it's a bus where it's not high frequency, are you going to be stood there for an hour? So there is a huge push in the BSIPs, and the expectation is that people are going to be moving towards that real-time information and using the transponder data to ping to let the bus stops know. But that means quite a lot of investment, particularly, you know, like some more rural bus stops where they don't have necessarily an electronic board. So they have to ensure that it can be accessed probably maybe via an app, as well as the rolling signage as well.
Okay, Lydia, that's the question's gone. I'll wait to see if Bill can put his question or comment in the chat, but if you'd like to carry on.
Okay, super. So I'm going to kind of roll into a few more suggestions. I think that number one is that if you are going to be trying to make these change and make this impact, that you need to gather evidence to kind of back up your case. So if we look at passenger numbers in general, I certainly know that in bus, for example, the things that really are affecting are the return to work policy. So a lot of people obviously were working from home. That's now changing, or at least people are going hybrid. So we've got more people traveling because of business. We have an aging population, many of whom are bus users or train users. The cost of owning a car and just driving in general now, because of the cost of living crisis, is making it more and more difficult for people to travel by car. So there's a really strong case for alternative transport options. Specifically as well, I think you need to understand the kind of current position and garner evidence to bolster your arguments in favour of the improvements that you're suggesting. So, you know, precisely, you could give numbers of potential beneficiaries, so the passengers, for any changes that you are suggesting. One way that you can get some specific numbers about like your local area is using council population figures. And also Visit Britain may have things about, let's say, a specific tourist attraction that maybe is local to you, which will give you an idea as well about visitors, because don't forget, you can utilize those numbers to strengthen your arguments. Also working with rail operators in terms of identifying what your passenger numbers are. The way that you're going to really get the bus operators interested in doing this is they need to know that there is demand. But also it's important to remember that when you are identifying your passenger numbers, that's not just the potential for their bus, if that makes sense, because they're going to have various other stops, aren't they, along the route. And so it might be like, we're not expecting you to completely change your entire timetable. We get that. But could you add one stop on rather than creating entirely new services? And also, I think when you're gathering your evidence, something else that you can do is actually start to do a bit of your research as to who the key players are. You might already know, you might have connections at your local transport authority, but also look at, for example, if it's an enhanced partnership in your area, who's chair of that board and who are the other board members. If you're wanting to start to liaise with operators as well, don't go to the MD. A lot of people make that mistake. I would be looking at maybe talking to your director of external relations as well, or people that are on the EP board. Has anyone got any comments or suggestions to add to that particular slide?
Lydia, a question for me, if that's okay, whilst everyone else is thinking. Just my own clarity, I guess. The traffic commissioner, I think I'm right in saying that the bus operators have to apply to them for changing timetable and route. Yes. Is there a possibility for community rail people to apply pressure to the traffic commissioner direct, or is that not the way that it works?
You could. But let's be honest, when you're trying to influence change, a lot of this is about relationships. So I would just be careful, you know, because ultimately you're asking the operator to change the route. So it's better to work with them than against them. But you could, you know, if you've got that kind of evidence and yet there's no bend.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anybody else? Okay, nothing showing at the moment, Lydia.
Super, right. The other thing that you can do in terms of building up this case, that you've just got some practical evidence, and I'm not talking about pages and pages and pages, we're just talking about some cold, hard data like the numbers, but also is a bit about your social economic kind of case. So depending again on what kind of area you're in, you need to work with local representatives. So it could be, you know, identify your parish councillors, your district councillors, right up to your local MP. Let them know what the situation is and also what the social and economic impact is of not filling those gaps. We've got a document, particularly for rural areas, on our website, which I've included the link to, that you could have a look on there. But consider, for example, you know your local area and the interchanges that you're talking about. You know, are there connections to health, to education, to large towns for work, for even, you know, supermarkets, that kind of thing. Something else as well that's important to do is to highlight the cost benefit ratio. So, you know, how can they afford not to connect up transport? If people can't afford cars and to travel in alternative methods, and let's be honest, we hope they don't anyway, because it would be much better if people were traveling in a more sustainable, greener way. But you know, if as a result of those things not being joined together, that's going to create isolation and loneliness. And the social care budget, is going to be extremely hard. There are lots of studies out there that demonstrate the damage that's done, and a lot of data is available around that, particularly because of course COVID as well, and when that happened, looking at the impact on individuals. And of course, don't forget congestion and pollution as well within that local argument. If you're really struggling to get your commercial bus operators to work with you in terms of this integration, another thing that I'd suggest is that you start to look at your local community transport as well. There are always some kind of community bus operators. Again, a simple Google or on your council council website, it should be able to show that up. So if you're struggling in the first instance with commercial, have a look at community as well. And it might be that they're able to create some kind of route that integrates the station. Any comments or questions on those?
Tim.
Sorry to come back for a third time, but
no, it's okay.
One of the actions that we've been undertaking over several years now at community rail level is to have representatives of community transport and our local bus companies on our individual community rail partnerships, and we found that's quite a useful forum for exchanging ideas, thoughts, and local actions, and we've worked pretty hard over time to try and have that representation at our steering group level, and it may not have given us lots of benefits, but it's certainly had a dialogue with local community groups and other users of the rail system with the bus operators.
That's brilliant practice. I think more people should do that. And I don't understand how LTAs can be coming up with local transport plans if we don't have that joined up thinking. I mean, you know, and I feel slightly embarrassed, but obviously today I had to do a lot of research. It's out of my usual sector, some of this. And, you know, I thought, no, actually, do you know what? I need to upskill myself. I should be more aware of these kind of things as well. So I think that's brilliant.
Martin.
Thank you, Tim. That was really a good example. I was wondering how easy it was for you to get the local bus companies on board, as it were, with that.
Am I allowed to answer? It's been quite challenging, I have to say, and when you cover a large geographical area where you've got several bus companies, you do get a patchy response, and actually the better funded bus operators tend to be more visible than the smaller companies, I have to say, because they haven't got the resources. But we did for a long time have a director on our board that was from a bus company, no longer with us in that sense at the moment, but still a director anyway. And one of our vice chairs of one of the line steering groups was from a bus company. In fact, on 2 of our lines, we've had vice chairs of steering groups from local bus companies. But we have to keep working at it, because we have to show that there is some value for the bus companies in interacting with us. And a couple of times, Lydia may be aware of this example, a couple of times we've done some sort of mini bus surgeries, train and bus, at Redhill Station, and showing off bus services. And actually we're doing one later this year showing off the new hydrogen buses that Metro Bus are introducing into Crawley and on their network in the southeast. So where we can, Martin, we try hard, but I won't say it's an easy fix. You just have to keep working at it.
If I may as well, if I don't mind, I think that's fantastic and really interesting. Yes, I am aware of some of the work that you do around that. I think we got an email the other day actually about planning some events with you. I went into Vic Walker, but I think, you know, there are lots of events that happen, you know, like International Day of Transport, or we organise something called Catch the Bus Month. And I know actually you as a community are hugely supportive. And if, you know, we want to run these kind of events that are surgeries that really do find out about where people need that integration and capture that voice, please do get in touch with bus users and we will help you run an event, and if we can, we'll turn up and be there with you to try and bolster this kind of thing and this work.
Yeah, just seen there's a few comments that go in the chat bar. I don't think there's anything specific that needs responding, but it's worth, if you haven't had a look, to check out the chat, because there's some links going in there as well. There's a comment from Ben at the end. I think there really ought to be a purge on making people use public transport post-COVID. So using public transport is good for health, social, physical. Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. I don't think there's anyone on the call here that wouldn't agree with you. I was just going to return to what you're saying about the integration with community transport. There are some examples of some practice around the country, Gloucestershire being one example where they're working closely with the community transport provider to extend some services from their stations. So again, if you want some further information, I can send that on to anyone who's interested. Lydia, we've got just under 10 minutes left, so I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you. Right, I'll rattle through, sorry. Some great points though here. Okay, so also going down the sustainability route, started to touch on that. So get in touch with your local bus user groups, and if you need to know who those are, then and you can't find them, get in touch with me and I will find out who they are for you. And also any local green organisations, looking at obviously cleaning up your local area, and any other local allies in that kind of sector. Also, don't forget to look in general at other sustainable modes as well. So when you're doing that integration, be aware of cyclists, walkers, you know, is there potentially space for people to be able to leave their bikes, or is there a higher outlet? Those kind of organisations can be really good allies for you. But equally, I'll just put a caveat in there, they could also be a competitor for you and a reason for them not to create that integration with bus. So, you know, it might be just that you're just wanting integration with sustainable travel. That's fine, but it's just worth pointing that out. Has anybody got any comments on that? Right, I will continue. I would also suggest, where possible, undertaking a bit of an interchange analysis. When I use the word interchange, I'm really talking about anywhere where, you know, not specifically a train station, but even the bus station, you know, where one stops and the other begins. So within your, you know, if you've got somewhere particularly in mind, think about, you know, where's the interchange where there's a large population literally who aren't being served, where there isn't that connection. If you've got areas where it's working really well, as we've kind of discussed, look at the differences between good ones and bad ones, you know, or is there an argument to say, well, we have this integration here and the population is much less, or there aren't as many, let's say, services, rail services passing through there, so it would be better placed to spend money on this one. Also, challenge people to make a journey with a bad interchange. So it might be that you get somebody like a politician, an MP, they love a photo opportunity, so that they can then contrast that experience. So I'm thinking about your Cambridge example earlier. You know, you need to get from Cambridge to Kings Lynn using public transport. Let them figure out how difficult that can be for people and why it is so important that we integrate this. Any questions or suggestions on that one? Okay, right, I'll continue, we're nearly there. So gathering lived experience. So we talked about you gathering evidence, which was very fact-based, but also gathering lived experience is really important. So I think it was Tim that mentioned about working with groups. So I would definitely be asking your local disability groups, older people, so like luncheon clubs, any kind of youth groups as well, for their experiences. If you can get them in writing, even better. That always adds a bit of strength to any kind of campaigning and push that you're doing. People buy into people. Again, a bit similar to as I suggested before with an MP, get a bus operator or a local authority person, particularly someone that works in transport, make a journey. You know, write it up. What are the challenges? What's easy? What's not? But also don't, when you're doing that, you don't just have to focus on the technical side of things, that human story, that interaction. So the missed opportunity that sadly sometimes this poor integration creates, which is very hard to capture. I look a lot at sometimes the Transport Focus and what they do, and they've done some really great studies, but sometimes it's hard, say for example, where there's a missed opportunity for education, to be able to identify that in terms of data, because people might not go to, for example, the college or the university they want, but they might go to a different one. So when you look at them, it's not a missed opportunity that's so obvious to be able to identify via numerics. And also all of these EPs should have some kind of passenger forum. So, and again, I think we kind of have touched on that and talked about, can you bring people that work who are bus operators onto your forums? Well, can you get onto those passenger forums as well? As a stakeholder, I like I say, I chair many passenger forums, and if somebody that was involved in rail wanted to be involved, I would welcome them with open arms, genuinely, because it really is about connecting us all. And finally, really just get the public on side as well. So get local radio and local press involved, social media, use areas in your stations to post information. We talked about this. Be careful of digital exclusion. Make sure there's a really clear call to action as well. A lot of people are really good at making the loud noise, but what is it that you want people to do as a result of that? Are you just trying to increase awareness? Or actually, is it more than that? Are you wanting people to sign a petition to say that they would use a bus service and rail service that's combined, or they want an integrated ticket or whatever it might be? Just think about what your action is when you're doing it. But I would honestly be really careful of being aggressively anti-local authority, because as they say, you catch more flies with honey. Any further comments or suggestions on any of these? Okay.
Tim has his hand up.
Sorry, honestly, for the last time, one thing that you perhaps didn't mention specifically, Lydia, but something that's we're quite keen on here in the Southeast is we do a lot of work with the universities in Brighton. Yes. And they actually have a sustainability officer who's part of one of our line steering groups, and actually one of our vice chairs. And that's quite an interesting dynamic, hearing a university's perspective on public transport.
Yeah, and they do surveys often, don't they, with students? And you're right, I didn't mention that, but it is something that I'm aware of, and that takes place in the EPs that I'm involved in. Universities, large local employers, particularly things like the NHS as well, and they often do transport surveys with their staff. How do you get to work and that kind of thing? And you can harness that data, and if you can get them on side as well, saying, actually, no, look, we really need this integration to happen, I think that can be very powerful as well. It's a really good point, Tim.
And Ben has his hand up.
Hello, Gary. I'm sorry to disturb you. I don't know whether you can say this or give me details of it now, Lydia, but I have a series of points here that my manager at Hereward CRP asked me to put to you. She wants to know how they integrate more with the March Town Service 33A and the railways. Cross country are interested in doing something. That's point number one. Point number two, there are bus service monitors going in March Rail Station, which is due to have cross country funding. Point number three is bus rail integration at Peterborough Station. How you can find the stops from the station and information available inside the shelter. Hereward CRP wants to do an audit with Rail Future, which is separate funding from the Levelling Up and other means of funding, but they are both both at early stages.
Okay, I think these are quite specific questions. So if you like, we could arrange to chat outside of this forum.
Okay. Right.
I'm more than happy to do that. So Gary, if you wouldn't mind passing on the contact details for me, and then I can set something up at your leisure, Ben, and we can have a proper talk. And I can also have a look at the areas that you're talking about, just to give myself a bit of a heads up before we go into discussion about it. But just where you touched on, the signage as well. Of course, the accessibility information regs have just come in, so they are phased, but there should be much better signage that we're starting to see around bus stops. Certainly they're included within that, so I'm hoping that they will be better resourced and better signed. I've got one final thought. Oh, I've got a whole 1 minute left. And yeah, this is the thought for the day. Difference between the UK and Switzerland is that in the UK, we talk about the cost of public transport, and in other countries, they talk about investment. That's what it all boils down to, money. Thank you very much for your time today. And like I say, the minutes will be available afterwards. And if anybody would like to talk to me outside of this, Gary, I'm quite happy for you to pass on details. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lydia. That was really, really interesting. If anybody does have any specific questions for Lydia, I can happily collate them and get them together. Just to say really that if you want to get in touch with me, most of the people on the call today I'm already in touch with, but anyone who has the benefit of watching this recording after the event, I can be contacted on an email address on display there.